Merry Christmas and Happy New Year from EV Comics. How's it going, everyone? Yes, I got a haircut. I want to quickly talk about something that I've noticed, and it's been hard for me to really put into words. This is my third time trying to record this video. I don't know what's wrong with me. But I want to talk about the differences between the Rippaverse and other indie comics that I've seen. And it's finally hit me after watching another indie comic trailer and another creator talking very passionately about his work. And it's finally clicked. I've finally figured out what it is about the Rippaverse comics that feels off to me. That feels something that feels just off, despite the fact that, for the most part, I have found some enjoyment in the Rippaverse comics. The only ones I've really not liked are Yaira and I would say ISOM 2. I really did not enjoy, in retrospect, I don't really enjoy ISOM 2 all that much. I can enjoy Alpha Core, Gooding, ISOM number 1, and I think that's it. I think that's all the comics so far. I didn't read Blood Ruth. But to me, the issue that I have found, and even in the ones that I enjoyed the most, it feels very corporate. It feels very business-minded, and that is likely intentional. Because from the onset, Eric July has been very public about the Rippaverse not being about, ISOM. It's not about like one character and then starting off from there. ISOM number 1 and 2 introduce as many characters as possible to the detriment of the storytelling, as I have said in my reviews. It was a detriment to the storytelling because it lacked focus. It lacked any kind of narrative of drive about this one character, right? It wasn't about ISOM. It was about all these other characters that were being brought in his first 2 books. And I think the reason why ISOM 3 is taking so long is because Eric really doesn't know how to wrap up a story that hasn't had a central theme. and I think there's advantages and there's disadvantages to this. The advantage is that he's been able to sell like 6 or 7 different comics at this point, with the idea. Horseman. I enjoyed Horseman. That was the one I forgot. He's been able to sell comics with the idea of spreading all these characters out, giving everyone a favorite character to latch onto and enjoy. And he's been able to sell and make a lot of money off of all of this, with multiple teams working on multiple different comics and stuff like that. He has set up his business to succeed in as broad as many comics as possible. And for 2025, he's planning on making 25 different books. Now, one of those I believe is a novel. The others are comics. And there's a lot of familiar faces, some new faces on the project. There's a lot of Chuck Dixon and Eric in the writing. There's the Saskas, unfortunately, on the writing of a novel and the Yaira number 2. And then there's your usuals on the art department with some newcomers and stuff like that. And what it is it's a dream come true for a lot of comic creators. I think a lot of comic creators want to have something like this, where you have you have multiple people drawing comics in your comic universe telling a story. But what this feels like, and it took me a while to realize this, is what it feels like is that it feels very corporate. The presentations of the Rippaverse all feel very corporate. It feels like something that Marvel or DC would put out. You've got the interview with the writers, you got the epic music in the background. Compare this to the many indie comics trailers where oftentimes, Monsters We Make, which is my example this time, you got Corey Kenshin making, this trailer with The Line, which is by no means a small company. But you got Corey Kenshin having an idea for a comic, working on it the last year and a half, and putting it together with a professional studio. Again, the comic is like not super indie by any means, but it is independent in the sense that it's not owned by like a major property, right? Like it's his idea. It's not connected to anything else. It is somewhat independent. And what I think is what I think is really interesting about it is if I go to his channel, right, and click on this video, he had this 23-minute video talking about the creating process of the comic, the writing progress, and everything involved with it. And this video oozes passion. There's not an instance in this entire video and the previous one where it feels like he is trying to sell us something. It doesn't feel like he's trying to like make a business out of this. He's not trying to make like a financial huge financial success out of this. He's just trying to tell his story because he enjoys the writing process. He enjoys the creativity process. It seems like he's had this idea floating around in his head for years, and he's finally making it. This is true creative passion, especially when you consider the thing is 246 pages and only $15. How does he do it? Because the Rippaverse stuff is all, even now that the price has come down, it's $25 per comic, usually, somewhere around that range. Which is still expensive when you compare it to other stuff. And it's simply because there is a difference in how they are approaching things. The Rippaverse is being run like a business. And again, I'm not going to say that's necessarily bad. I think the idea of it by, he's paying the artists and everyone what they're worth. And, they're getting paid good. There's a lot of business practices that are probably better with the Rippaverse compared to some other comic book companies. There's also some stuff that's worse, I'm sure. But the main point of it is to say that there is a vibe difference between the two. There is a vibe difference between the two. And for better or worse, I think the Rippaverse feels often very safe, very corporate, and very cookie cutter in the tone and feel of all of these comics. All of them sort of have a familiar feel to them where they're not really trying to break the mold. They're not telling super interesting stories. They're telling it feels a little generic, I guess is maybe the best word to describe it, is that the stories often just feel generic superhero-like. It doesn't feel like it's focusing too much on the actual characters of the story. It feels like it's trying to focus on the plots. And when you focus on plot, and this is something that I've had to try and avoid with my comics, when you focus so much on plot, you forget the characters. And when you take a step back and, review your work, review what you've written, oftentimes it feels a little disconnected. It feels a little less impactful because if the characters aren't well written, if the characters aren't relatable in some sense, if they don't have some kind of meaningful flaws to them, the plot won't really feel like it matters because the characters in that plot are not being related to, are not being very effective at connecting to the audience. And I feel that with most Rippaverse protagonists, the Alpha Core, not very relatable. Maybe if you're a cop, you can relate to it, but I personally just don't relate to them. Horseman, somewhat relatable. The goal of wanting to provide for his family, especially a family member who cannot work. There's some people I can relate to that a little bit. My brother went through cancer last year and could not work throughout the time, so I was trying to help him financially with some things, and I'm still kind of helping him a little bit as he's trying to get back up on his feet. But the main thing is that is like a small part of that character that I relate to. The rest of it I can't really relate to. Yaira, no one can relate to her because she is flawless and she's an immortal goddess. No one can relate to her, right? More people can relate to Wonder Woman than her. And they're almost the same type of character. And then you get to Gooding, which is like the most brilliant genius man. He doesn't really have a flaw himself either, other than he's maybe a little too confident. It's not really that meaningful of a flaw. It's not something that a lot of people can really easily relate to, I guess. And then you've got Isom, which I feel like is the most relatable character in the Rippaverse. I feel like his drive of, doing, he retires from heroing. He just wants to, to make a living with his ranch. He wants to help his employees / friends. He wants to help his family. And then whenever things get serious, whenever he feels like his pride's been wounded, he's like, I'm going to fix this now because my pride's been hurt and I'm going to do that. I think that's a very relatable character. I think overall, out of all the Rippaverse comics, Isom, which is probably, the two comics are probably the most flawed narratively out of all of them. I like that comic the most. Strangely enough, I think Alpha Core is probably the best written comic, and is thus I think the best comic under the Rippaverse. But selfishly, I find Isom 1 and 2, the character of Isom, to be the most interesting so far out of all of them. And maybe that's a hot take for me to say. Maybe that's something that's crazy for me to say. But overall, I am grasping at straws, trying to find anything in the Rippaverse that I can relate to. And I'm not finding it very easily. And I think that is the core difference between the Rippaverse and other indie comics. Is that other indie comics are far more focused by passion, far more focused on character and relatability, versus the more corporate business style of introducing characters very quickly to sell as many comics as possible and give more artists and writers, jobs that could keep them making money. It'll keep the warehouse fully functional. It'll keep all the employees that they're busy. It feels like it's just busy work. It feels like it's just throwing stuff out for the sake of throwing stuff out. And maybe that's not the mentality in the actual production of people working on it. Maybe that's not how they feel at all. Totally possible. But ultimately, that is how it feels to me. And I want to know if people can agree with that. Again, I'm not necessarily saying that if you run your comic book company as a business instead of as a passion art project, that you are worse than people who don't. I'm not saying that at all. There's different approaches here, and obviously, financially, the Rippaverse has made the correct decisions so far in making money. They haven't made the best decisions in telling great stories, and that's sort of where the disconnect begins, I think. And this is sort of what I've noticed over the years of reviewing this stuff and reading it, is that it is a successful business, but not necessarily successful at telling great relatable stories to the people who are buying the comics. That's just my overall thoughts. That's just how I feel about the situation currently. And Monsters We Make, I have not read the comic yet. It has not arrived. But overall, the presentation of this, the passion behind it, and everyone on the team, it seems so much more alive than anything in the Rippaverse I've seen. So, with all that being said, I just want to know your thoughts. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? I feel like this video is going to have an interesting comment section. So, Little Miss Steel 2 is out. You can read it for free on Webtoon or Global Comics. I prefer Global Comics. Apparently a lot of people do, because it's getting a ton more views there than it is on Webtoon. Rippaverse 3. Little Miss Steel 3 is already in production. It's a quarter of the way done. Excuse me. Had a hiccup. A quarter of the way done. Expect that sometime around March. So thanks so much for watching. Till next time. Peace out.